Hi, I'm Jenna Friedman with Broadly Meets. Today we are going on set of Melissa Harris Perry on MSNBC to talk to Melissa Harris Perry.
I am, in being a feminist and having been trained as a feminist, very good at using my voice.
Melissa Harris Perry is an author, professor, mother, public intellectual, radical feminist, and general all-around badass. She also hosts a successful show on MSNBC that bears her name. In a media environment where most public figures sanitize what they say, Melissa is a fearless, outspoken intellectual, still able to engage mainstream America on complex issues regarding race, class, and gender.
Talk to me about what this symbol means for activists like you, for Bree and others who clearly are doing work about policy, but also seem to still care about this. Are you sure you want to have that fight?
We got a chance to sit down with Melissa, talk to her, and bask in her wisdom. Today we are talking to accessible radical, tenured radical feminists.
Tenured radical.
Tenured radical is actually like a negative term, right?
No, I'm down.
Okay,
Radicalism.
I'll do it one more time. So first question, can you explain how you ended up as a host
Sure.
on your own show on MSNBC?
Yeah, so I'm not quite sure. I was in my academic world doing my research on African American politics, and suddenly that research became relevant in a public sphere because suddenly the work that I was doing became part of our national discourse when State Senator Obama became Senator Obama, and then Senator Obama ran for the U.S. presidency. And just kind of along with him, I started doing more commentary, and the next thing beyond that was my own show. I wanted to have a voice, but I always figured that voice would be either in writing or teaching. I didn't expect it to be in broadcast.
So what's the hardest part about being a public intellectual?
You know, I think the world generally presumes that smart people are tall white men, and I'm a, little short, plump black girl. I speak with a speech impediment, and so some people think I shouldn't be on TV. So at every point I'm trying to not prove that I'm smart, but just host a conversation, but that conversation is framed within this idea that I'm the smart girl at the table. So anything you do that's not smart is pretty easily defined as a space to then wipe out everything else that you may have said. Yeah.
I have a little bit of a speech. My mom was always like, you're never gonna make it because you have a sibilant S. But now you're thrust into a public spotlight and your audience is larger, and it's not just people who would take your class, it's people who would tell people not to take your class.
Yes.
How is that? How is it like to talk to people who are on your wavelength and people who are actively looking to poke flaws in whatever you're saying?
So I'll have regular viewers who genuinely and generally like me and the show, but I will really anger them because I'll be critical of the president one day, or, the Rachel Dolezal thing. A lot of my regular viewers are just like, how could you think that?
But is it possible that she might actually be black? Can it be that one would be cis black and trans black? That there is actually a different category of blackness that is about the achievement of blackness despite one's parentage?
Do you think that the current political climate makes it harder to have open, honest discussions about issues?
I was an early Twitter adopter, and I really had to stop because I found the @replies to be so triggering and awful and painful that I just had to opt out of a space that I really enjoyed. But what I don't want to be, and this is, I think, the challenge, I don't want to be a person who doesn't listen to criticism. It's just that in the public realm, the criticism is so often personal that it's not very helpful, because if I'm just a horrible person, there's not a lot I can do about that, right? Whereas if I've made a huge mistake on my regression coefficient, I can fix that.
Let's talk about your book, one of the books, or just the idea of the crooked room.
Sure.
What that is.
So the crooked room actually came out of these set of psychology experiments. So you were literally in a crooked room, and these psychologists were looking to see if you can get yourself in this chair fastened to the real up and down. And it turns out that as people, what we do is we will tilt ourselves so that we make the room seem and appear perceptually to be straight, but actually we could be as much as 45-degree angle. That echoes back to me the experience of being a black woman in America. That constantly I feel like I'm getting all these images of what a black woman is, what we're supposed to be, whether we're these happy mammies or these hypersexualized Jezebels. And I feel like I'm standing like this in the room and I'm trying to figure out, well, what am I really?
Being confronted with an image that may seem retrograde or off or antiquated, and how to cope with that.
I'm not the angry black woman, but I mean, I can be angry. I'm not the hypersexual Jezebel, but I get down with Beyonce. So what does it mean to be able to have these images, but not to be constantly made crooked by them? It's true for trans folks. It's true for gay men and lesbians. It's true for all these bodies in the world that are non-normative, that are not what they're supposed to be.
Like, we talked about the Sex and the City movie.
Yep.
Which we both saw.
Right. I've seen them all. Yeah, I'm so sorry. I've seen them all, every single one of them.
And Jennifer Hudson's character in that. And when I saw that, it was jarring.
You did the whole television series without ever really having black women, so why do we suddenly have to have a black woman in the movie,
As
right?
like the assistant.
And not just the assistant, but like the assistant who somehow like can fix this white woman who is twice her age, right?
You brought me back to life. And you gave me Louise Vuitton.
So if you are a powerful, successful woman and you have a young woman working as your assistant, your job is to mentor her. That's backwards and crazy and clearly racialized, because why would she, as a 20-something black woman, have all the answers for this 40-something woman?
Yeah. So then my question is, when we see images that jars you, how do you respond to that?
So we know, for example, that angry, strong black woman image has an impact in domestic violence cases. We know that, for example, Marissa Alexander, who shoots up into a ceiling and ends up with more jail time than some individuals who shot and killed unarmed persons, right, is in part because as a black woman, the court sees her as a particular kind of threat. But I'll also say this, you cannot fix stereotypes by acting in an unstereotypical way. Enslaved women were not hot-tailed Jezebels, but they were labeled as such because it served the system of white supremacy and slavery.
So how do you fix the stereotypes?
Well, so you can't. Our job is to lead a social movement that holds police accountable for acting on those stereotypes, so that despite the fact that they exist, we can exist in a safe, democratic society.
So those stereotypes become, like, you're aware of the stereotype, or...
I like a good, Dave Chappelle often trafficked in a variety of stereotypes, but always with a kind of critique.
Subversive.
Yeah, with a subversive aspect. I like a good song with a B word and an N word in it here and there. I, consume Sex and the City and, a Real Housewives here and there, right? Like, I don't think the world has to be sanitized to make us feel better, but I do think that a proliferation of images matters. So take the Real Housewives series, lots of troubling depictions of white women, but those are not the only depictions of white women that exist in the world. So that's what we need. We need in part a proliferation of images, yeah.
I think that humor is a really effective way to talk about really sad, scary things because they're happening, and it's like a really effective coping mechanism. And a lot of comedians will say that college kids are more PC now. Do you think their thought process is different?
The main thing I think that makes them different is they used to get my jokes because I used to be much closer in age. I guess I was 25 when I started teaching, and many of my students were 20, so I would make cultural references. I would talk about hip hop music, and we were all in the same vibe. The kids who show up in my classes are often very anxious about social problems, about inequality, about racism, and most recently, obviously, about Black Lives Matter and what that means to them. And an awful lot of what you're constantly trying to do is to translate to 18, 19, and 20-year-olds in your classrooms. It's not that different in news, except you have better lighting, more resources, and lots more people who help you to tell that story than you do in the classrooms. So I do try to keep thinking of the show as a big classroom.
Even this idea of everybody wants to be black till the police officers show up is a presumption about the physical identification of blackness that can occur in a casual interaction.
And what do you think we should be doing to ensure that we live in a more just world?
I think the last thing I would say is we have to talk across difference, and it's really hard and painful. I do think that the health of our democracy in part requires some deliberation across difficult lines.
Mm-hmm. And putting somebody who is coming from a background of academia out into the public sphere to prod people and talk about these things.
Well, I'm down. I'm happy to do it, and then to bring lots of other college professors to the table to help me do it better. Yeah,
that's so great.
Thanks.
Well, thank you so much for speaking with us.
Thank you.
This has been Melissa Harris Perry.
But not on the weekend on MSNBC.
Yeah, but not on Melissa Harris Perry on MSNBC.